Officers from Immigration and Customs Enforcement have arrested and are threatening to deport a pro-Palestinian activist who led protests last year at Columbia University. Mahmoud Khalil is a legal permanent resident of the United States and married to a U.S. citizen. He's now being held in an immigration jail in Louisiana while his case is pending. President Trump said this is the first arrest of many. Now, the case touches both free speech and national security exceptions to the First Amendment. So, Jenny, should Khalil be deported?
So, I want to draw your attention to who's the visual spokesperson for this, which is Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is Secretary of State. Typically, the Secretary of State generally has no role in typical deportation proceedings. It should be potentially Kristi Noem as head of Homeland Security. But the legal grounds that the Trump administration is using is a little-known provision that allows the Secretary of State to identify and declare if an individual who's here in the country could be a threat to national security and is, say, an immigrant, a legal immigrant. So that is highly unusual. This particular case has only been used in a very small set of cases. The one time it's been used that there was a challenge to this idea of the Secretary of State unilaterally deciding that somebody is a threat to national security, it was challenged. And the challenge said that it was unconstitutional, but through some kind of legal complications, it ultimately never left the law books. So that's the grounds. Should he be deported? I think the question is has he actually engaged in any kind of illegal activities? He was not arrested. He hasn't been sanctioned by his university.
But does he have to have broken the law to be deported in this circumstance?
I don't know. I mean, I think your analysis is excellent because I don't think this is like a free speech case. I think it's an executive power case. You know, on the one hand, I'm sympathetic to the terrorism and symmetry arguments that have been made that we can prevent aliens who've endorsed terrorist activity from entering the country. We should be able to deport resident aliens for doing the same. And then the question is, you know, was Khalil endorsing Hamas? But that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the statute that the Secretary of the State has the right to deport these people as long as there are any negative foreign policy consequences. That strikes me as an incredibly low bar. Yeah. And Rubio has said that we have the right to deny you for virtually any reason. And so if this is successful, I think it'd give enormous power to future secretaries of state, and that should alarm all of us.
But if the Secretary of State, if it's his decision, and if his decision that he's a threat is based on speech, is that not a First Amendment argument?
I don't think so. I mean, I think you just have to appeal to, is there a foreign policy interest? And so you get one foreign leader who says, yeah, I think the U.S. would be better off if we deport him.
Yeah, so the permanent resident can engage in constitutionally protected free speech, but as my colleagues have pointed out, it comes with that caveat, and this is the immigration law that Clinton passed. It comes with that caveat that even though you have right to say things that are constitutionally protected and the government cannot do anything. However, here is the catchword. If there is an understanding that there is a threat to foreign policy and national security interests of the U.S., then the Secretary of State, even if you did not commit a crime, can move to deport you from United States. And that applies to permanent residents also. I don't think he should be deported, but, you know,
but that's the pretext for deporting
I
him,
agree.
right?
I agree.
He is being deported. The actual reason he's being deported is because of his speech and protests, which are protected under the First Amendment for legal permanent residents as well. So, I mean, we can say it's for this obscure reason that, like, unprecedented never gets used, but in fact, he's punishing people whose speech and actions he doesn't like, but which are perfectly legal and which we should be standing up for as a country.
What worries me is this move to now use the labeling of terrorism as the excuse, right? And I'm watching it happening now, the debate on social media. People instantly, when they hear, oh, well, but if he's a terrorist, then we don't want him in this country. He needs to be deported. And again, there are echoes here of post 9/11 moves by the government and by civil society to say we don't want internal threats. And I find all of this incredibly dangerous.
I should say, too, that, you know, I'm an expert on the economics of immigration, not at all the legal aspects of immigration, really. The claim that the legal permanent residents have constitutional right is true, but also not. So you go, 2008 PBS had a piece outlining immigrants' rights that basically said that they have a right to due process, but those rights are not as strong as those that are granted to U.S. citizens. So due process might not include the right to see a judge, and the bar for what constitutes evidence is very low. And so my point is, I think the claim about their constitutional rights is more complicated than to say.
But, I mean,
not that, that's not a should statement, right? I'm not saying that's right, or it makes me feel perfectly comfortable.
This is what Trump does, right? He pushes the so-called Overton window. It's this concept that policy people like to throw around, which is this set of ideas and policies and government activities that fall within a range of sort of acceptability, right? And that window can shift over time, so that ideas that seemed fringe or crazy or really on the outliers become more acceptable. Typically, this happens sort of gradually over time. And Trump continuously does this, right? He takes these kind of fringe ideas, exceptions, and he tries to make them acceptable, right? And what that means is that then it becomes a new norm. It becomes more acceptable. The people around him don't stop him, right? So political elites, indirectly endorse it. And that means the public starts to think that, I guess this is okay, right? So if we think Khalil is the last person that's going to be subject to this, we're kidding ourselves, right? That even just legal permanent residents or immigrants are going to be subject to this. No, I think none of us can feel really safe.
I agree. There would be a very much chilling effect. And to Jenny's point, this idea that terrorism has become the buzzword around the world. We see Modi government do that in India. Philippines, they do it for drug users, right? And if you go back to U.S. history during the South African apartheid, there was, oh, you're a communist if you protested against apartheid, or you're pro-Saddam during Iraq war. But this law book has not been thrown yet, and this is the test case that Trump wants to see how far this can be taken. This will have a chilling effect.
And he has said this will be the first of many.
Yes. And they've already identified additional students.
Yes,
and he calls anyone who disagrees with him un-American.
Yeah. So he has said an un-American activity. So we are back to that McCarthy kind of situation.